everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the third in our series of Meet the Studio events. It's been fantastic to see so many people signed up for today's event. Lots of people who've been to the previous events and lots of new faces. And also really great to see again that we've got a really broad range of attendees at all different stages of their careers and spread all over the world. So a big welcome to everyone from sunny Sussex. For the new people who don't know us, my name is Rebecca and I work for a company called Wired Sussex. We are a membership organisation for creative, digital and tech companies in Sussex, and we support them in a huge number of ways. One of the ways that most people know about Wired Sussex is through our sector-specific jobs board. I'm sure a lot of you are signed up for job alerts. We have about 100 jobs on there at the moment, specifically around games, and about 150 sort of generally. So if you don't know the jobs board, feel free to go and take a look at that. But the purpose of today's event really is to give you an insight and a peek behind the curtain of some of Sussex's best games companies, so that you can post, ask them any questions that you have, and get some insights into what they look for when they're recruiting. So a big thank you to our studios that are joining us today. We do want to give an opportunity for everyone who's watching today's event to ask any questions. So if you do have any questions to ask, please feel free to pop them into the chat. And my colleague Anna is there, and she'll be able to forward those across to me. So please do send across any questions. We're also on Twitter at Wired Sussex Jobs. My colleague Rifa is there fielding any questions that come in through Twitter. So please feel free to join the conversation there too. Also, a massive thank you to Edward Street Quarter, who have sponsored this series of events. It's great to work with them. They're building a big space in the centre of Brighton with accommodation and studio space, which is sort of specifically targeted around the digital industries like the games industry. So a huge thanks to them for sponsoring today's event and letting it take place. So I think that's all the introductions. Please do introduce yourself as well in the chat. We'd love to say hello to everyone. So yeah, feel free to introduce yourself as well. So I think we'll kick off now, and we're going to be starting with the Chinese room. So, hi Dan, could you? Nice to see you. How are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. It's not raining, which is like the first time in a month, so it's pretty good.
I know it's glorious outside. I feel a bit weird wearing a sleeveless dress, but I'm making the most of it. So, could you tell us maybe a little bit more about the Chinese room and what games you make and what you do there, please?
Sure. So we started off. We actually started off as making mods for Half-Life 2 back in 2007, and became a sort of professional studio in 2012. We have sort of are probably best known for story-focused games, titles like Dear Esther, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs. We've also worked in mobile VR, and most recently we've shipped a 2.5D platformer for Apple Arcade called Little Orpheus. We used to be a small indie. We're about 15 people. We joined Sumo Digital back in 2018, and we're currently at just over 40 people. We have got a brand new, lovely, shiny office sitting completely empty in the centre of Brighton, which one day we hope we'll actually be allowed to go back to. But yeah, we work on original IP. We work across different platforms, so console, mobile, PC. We're currently at work on a couple of projects at the moment, which are unannounced. And yeah, I suppose that's kind of us really. I guess our focus is, as a studio, as I say, is very much on storytelling. We're very focused on audio, music, voice acting and dialogue, art and animation. Traditionally, we've not been very mechanically orientated. That's very much changing now as we're part of Sumo. As we're sort of ramping up and producing games that are more and more, I guess, traditional genres. We're trying to find ways of putting our own sort of very special spin on that.
Brilliant. And you mentioned there that you're part of Sumo Digital. Could you tell people a little bit about what Sumo Digital is and what that relationship is like?
Yeah. So Sumo are one of the actually largest UK games companies. I think we're now pushing over 1,000 people, I think across 12 studios, mainly in the UK. We also have a couple of studios outside that in the US and in Pune in India. Sumo have got 17, I think, plus years experience, mainly working in co-dev and work for hire. So they work with a range of partners across a range of different projects. So they're sort of made very significant contributions to things like Hitman. They've been looking after Little Big Planet for many years now, and probably most well known for karting games. And they've got arranged across their studios. They have some studios like Red Kite are a part of Sumo who are very, very engineering focused. Some of the sort of like named studios that are mainly working on sort of code up to the largest, which is Sheffield, which is about 330 people. And then there are other studios like us that are basically working on original titles. So we're independently managed. We basically make kind of our own strategic decisions in sort of like consultation with Sumo management, and then it's sort of down to us to deliver on those. And we share with all the other Sumo studios kind of central services, so stuff like marketing, HR, finance. And what it really works well for us is it means that we get to have the kind of scale of a large, mid to large sort of indie developer, and we still get to have all of that sort of ability to be very fast, to be very creative, to be very sort of geared around what we want to do. But we have all the security and support of being part of a larger organization. So in terms of people's jobs, there's like a more sort of security. If you're a 15-person indie studio, you tend to be quite hand to mouth, and it makes it quite hard when you are sort of like running from project to project. Being part of Sumo means that we have a much longer sort of like strategic sense of where we're going and a much greater sense of security about how we get there. So it's kind of the best of both worlds for us, really.
Thank you. And you were talking there about how you create your own IP. And I was just wondering sort of if you could tell us a little bit about that process and how that affects maybe the sorts of roles that you look for, and perhaps how that is, maybe how that sort of creating your own IP is reflected in the culture at the Chinese room as well.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, it's very challenging working on your own IP. It takes a long time to get things spun up. I mean, I'm sure sort of like most people watching this are aware, you know, the majority of times when you're working in games, you're working with partners and publishers, and new IP tends to take a long time to get sort of secured, find the right partners for, and that sort of stuff. So it's really interesting because you kind of are often working on a project while you're trying to simultaneously find out what that project is and make sure that project is actually the project that you want it to be. So you are kind of forced necessarily into a very sort of like close-knit community of developers. You have to be very good at communication, very good at sort of like supporting each other, helping each other sort of like achieve the best they can. The disciplines tend to work very, very tightly together, and things can be very, very fast moving. So it's a very exciting area to work in because it has those challenges in it, and because you are in a situation where, particularly on a company our size, everybody working on a project has a visible contribution to that project. That you know, we're not. If you go up to sort of like the really large AAA companies where, you know, you have departments of the same game working in different countries who may never even speak to each other across the course of the 5 years it takes to develop. Our development cycles tend to be shorter, sort of around 2 years. There's 40 people basically working in the same room on the same project. So it really suits people that are sort of looking for that very sort of communicative, very sort of like type, very, very social type of development. Lots and lots of ideas floating around. I mean, in terms of the way we sort of work, we have our discipline leads who are all extremely experienced, and we'll sort of like talk and throw around ideas, sort of find something that we feel is heading in the right direction or should be interesting, do very rapid prototyping and iterating around that, involve other members of the team as and where we need it. So if we need some art, we need some animation, some audio, those people are pulled in to kind of work at it, as well as you're kind of kicking this thing backwards and forwards, getting it to a place where you go, okay, this definitely feels like it's a game that's got legs that we want to go out there, we want to talk to partners about. And then gradually the team is sort of like is built around that. So you have the kind of core people. You're always going to need a lot of engineers up front. You're always going to need a lot of designers up front. Artists tend to come on later. Specialist roles like animators, VFX, lighting artists can come on sort of like later as you kind of need those. But because we work like a lot of the sort of like larger studios, I suppose, I mean, say larger, we're very small in the grand scheme of things for game studios, but we have enough people that it means we can actually have those people on as full-time specialists when we're working prior to Sumo, and there were about 15 of us, there was no way we could justify having things like lighting artists or animators. That was all handled freelance. And normally now we have a few of those people in-house, and then we also use freelance support as and needed to kind of like plug the gaps with the sort of additional requirements we have.
Brilliant. Just on that point, I saw a question coming in from Sarah, one of the attendees, saying, as you're working on your own IP, how do you choose your designers, especially character designers?
So we have a sort of full-time design team that we, I mean, I don't know how sort of well people that are watching this know kind of how game design breaks down. There tends to be sort of, there's a bit of a spectrum. And on one side of it, you have technical design who work very, very, very closely with code. Often they're making tools. They're kind of assisting on sort of like the pipeline that'll help other people do it. And then you kind of move across and you've got system designers who are working on stuff like the game mechanics, who may be literally spending, you know, if you work for Nintendo, you may be spending 3 years getting Mario's jump just absolutely right. And that's the stuff that just makes a game play brilliantly. And then you have level designers that are actually sort of controlling the flow of action, what it is the player does, helping the artist build the spaces and kind of dealing with the sort of the drama of it. And then some studios also then alongside that have narrative designers that are working really fundamentally on player experience, on how the story is delivered, the sort of narrative flow of it. And even bigger companies, you then those specialisms kind of break down even further. So when you're starting a project, you're looking at how, say, mechanically complex it is, which will determine the ratio, say, of systems designers against level designers. If it's particularly kind of story focused, there may be more drift over to more sort of level designers or narrative designers. It kind of changes project by project. And one of the things that you sort of have to do as a studio is balance the skills and experience within your design team to make sure you've got a sort of a pretty flexible degree of people that can be assigned to the projects that you've got going on. But it also means for people that are sort of like entering into game design as a career or are looking to transfer across to game design as a career, then kind of understanding where you might sit within that spectrum of roles is quite an important thing to do. If you are someone who has coding skills, who is very technically orientated, technical designers are harder to find often than level designers. You probably want to gear yourself in that direction. It's a really good route into the industry. If you're not very technical, then you're likely your entry role into the games industry is going to be down the level design route, where you're learning scripting, you're building your sort of technical skills, and you're working in engines like Unity or Unreal to kind of like place things out and use blueprints and things like that. And I think the last thing that's worth saying on that, particularly on the design perspective, is that an awful lot of designers get into the industry through QA, which is quality assurance, which is effectively sort of complex testing. And when you're doing QA, one of the things that you are looking at is really breaking a game into 1,000 pieces and putting it back together again and developing a very, very strong understanding of how games are made and put together. And it gives you a really good exposure into what sort of works or not. And an awful lot of people that work in design in the industry have come through that QA route. So it's something that people that are transferring across or are looking for a role in the games industry, it's definitely worth looking at that as well, because often the barrier to entry, even at a junior design level, is fairly high. There's sort of an expectation, if you haven't done a very specific college course, that you'll have direct kind of industry experience or building experience. So if you don't have that, looking at QA roles is quite a good way of looking at another route through.
Brilliant. That's so helpful. Thank you. Because I know that there is a lot of interest from people with transferable skills who want to move into the games industry. And the next question I was going to ask really was sort of what you look for when hiring for people with transferable skills. And I think that was really sort of insightful around the sort of the QA route. But for other roles that you hire for, are there sort of particular things you look for people with transferable skills, or any advice that you have for someone who's thinking of maybe taking those next steps and want to think about a strategic way to do that?
Sure. I mean, so it's probably good to understand the different roles within development and the kind of areas that it breaks down into. The sort of, I guess, the simplest way of doing it is you have design, art, production, and code. And within those, you have the different roles. If you want to go into programming, then you need to have either C# or C++ experience for pretty much most modern game engines. That's going to be it. If you're working in Unity, it's going to be C#. If it's Unreal, it's going to be C++. That's the kind of given. If you don't have C++ or C# skills, get them before you start talking to games companies. Unless it's sort of, obviously this is different if it's stuff like apps and things like that, which is not something we do, then there's sort of like other things going on there. But those are the core things for that. For art, you're going to need to be using kind of I guess, a sort of fairly expected level of stuff. Maya or 3ds Max, Photoshop, Blender. It's relatively quick to kind of do a bit of research and get what are the core technologies that are used in game art production for that. It tends to be quite technical. I think although we'd expect artists to have strong fine art skills and ability to do it, you also are going to be working in a software package, even if you're doing concept art increasingly, which is, sort of like, particularly we get a lot of applications from people that have been illustrators, even digital illustrators, and they're looking to move across the concept art. There is still a fair degree of engine work involved in that, because often we're doing paint overs and block outs of 3D spaces and things like that. So definitely understand the technology that will be worked with by the studios you're applying to. It's relatively easy to find out the kinds of engines and tech they've been using to build their games, and really being able to show some proficiency in those. And if you're coming across and you don't have that direct experience, usually the thing which definitely for art, without question, the first thing we look at is a portfolio above anything else. If we're looking at potential 3D artists, we'll go straight to the portfolio, and that will come in before education or qualifications. So anything you can do to show practical ability, I think, is really, really important. And for art, I think the best advice I can give for that is to, as well as showing finished pieces, is to show process. If you're putting stuff on ArtStation, then show your sort of like finished environment or character, or whatever it is you've been working on, and then include some development shots in that. So sort of like it helps us see under the hood of how you built something, because often you're likely to be asked to do a test, whether that's a code test or an art test or whatever it is. And if it took you, if you've made something, extraordinary, but it's taken you 6 months to do it, you're going to struggle in a game development environment where it's so fast moving. Actually, we're looking at people that can kind of create at pace. So being able to understand how you get to a finished thing is there. And it's also not necessarily about being able to sort of like produce the Sistine Chapel, that especially if you're transferring in, you're going to be coming in probably even if you've got a lot of skills from your previous role, you are going to drop down towards a more sort of junior role while you learn the very, very specific aspects of development. So no one's expecting people to come in like completely kind of fully formed genius level. So don't be afraid if you've got stuff to learn and to talk about that stuff. What we're more interested in is people that clearly demonstrate an aptitude and an ability to learn and develop and to take on those kind of skills as well.
Thank you. That's so helpful. I've seen we've got a lot of questions coming in, and I really want to make sure that we cover them all. But what I'll probably do now is just make sure I've asked all my questions. Sorry. Oh, actually, I did have one final question, sorry, which was when we were talking about sort of people applying to Chinese Room specifically, is there anything that you look for that you think sets candidates apart? We're asked that all the time from job seekers. What is that studio looking for that I can put in my application or put in my portfolio that would perhaps set me apart from, I know that you will get a lot of applications. So if you could perhaps cover that, that would be really helpful. And to everyone who's put questions in the chat, I've made a note of them and I'm going to cover as many as I can. So bear with us. Okay,
I think so. There are a lot more people looking for jobs in the games industry than there are jobs in the games industry. And there are more and more and more graduates coming out every year who are being prepped specifically for the games industry. So competition is really, really big. So it's kind of a bit of a truism. It counts for any job application you're making, but it will absolutely count for game studios, and particularly for kind of the sort of smaller or mid-sized game studios. Is we're going to be looking for people that fit the studio culture. So don't be disheartened if you don't get a job, even if you've got the skills, because it might just be that the way you present yourself doesn't fit the studio culture. And that doesn't mean to say you presented yourself wrong. Different studios have different studio cultures, and understanding, doing your research about the studio, how they go about making games, what sort of games they're making, what seem to be their sort of like their passions or their interests, and tailoring your application to that specific studio. So when we're looking at a covering letter or when we're looking at a CV, we're looking at it of going, does this person fit within us? Not just, is this person a good, X type designer or artist, but will this person fit within our team, fit within our culture? Do they show the same? Are they interested in the sort of stuff we're interested in? That doesn't necessarily mean to say that you have to like the games we make. I think there is one of the things you learn when you've been in the industry a little while is there is a big difference often between the games you like playing and the games you like making. And that's okay. But there has to be, you're sort of demonstrating that you have chosen that studio for a particular reason, and you can sell to the studio why you fit their development environment. Nothing gets you kicked into the long grass faster than, even if someone's got the skills and you read it, you just think, this is one of 500 applications that have been sent out to every single studio in the world. And of course you have to do that. And, you know, we get sort of cold approaches all the time. But the stuff which rises to the top is when people have those skills, they have those things you're looking for, and they can also talk about specifically why they want to work for you. So do your research. And there are, you know, even in bigger studios, there are people at the end of the application process that are reading your covering letters, that are looking at your stuff. So don't think you're applying to a corporation. Assume you are talking to specific individual recruiters. And the more you can kind of have that contact, because there are people that we also go back to that don't make it across the sort of threshold, or we can't give them a job this time around. We have people working for us that we've gone back to 6 months later and gone, now we need this. You were really, really close this time around. We really liked you. We'd like to talk to you again, or hire you at this point as well. So don't see it as being fire and forget. Develop those relationships with the studios and those recruiters, because you're in it sort of for the long game.
And I think, if I may just add one thing to that I think is really important, when studios talk about culture, they don't mean that they want cookie cutter employees who all think the same and act the same. And I know that studios like the Chinese Room do a lot to sort of improve diversity and you know, the different lived experiences and the different things that everyone can bring to enrich your studio. So I think you know, I know that the Chinese Room do a lot around that, and you've run schemes yourself to try and improve the pipeline of talent coming into the industry. So I would say, if it's okay, I would just sort of echo what you were saying around, you know, culture is really important, but culture doesn't mean cookie cutter. It means what you bring to that culture.
Absolutely. No, it's not. And it is also, you know, I think it's a two-way street, and that's really important as well, that you might want the job, but you also want to be working somewhere that you want to be working. Making games is really, really, really tough. It's a difficult job. It's very, very intense. So being somewhere where not only you fit the studio, but the studio fits you, and you're doing whatever you can during the recruitment process, from doing initial research on the studio through to interview. It's also an opportunity for you to be going, do I want to work here? Is this somewhere where I feel I will fit? Because if you're going to be making a game somewhere for a year, 2 years, and you don't like it, you won't last in the industry very long. And both the industry may be missing out on talent, but also you'd be maybe missing out on a career. So it's really important that you're also understanding what you need and what you want, and you're asking the right questions of the studio. What are the opportunities for career progression? You know, how do I measure how well I'm doing? How does line management, mentorship, what training and learning and development opportunities do I have? These are all really valid questions to be asking. And they're also impressive questions to be asking. When someone comes and they're asking those questions to us, we're seeing someone who has got initiative, who wants to be in the future, who wants to be in the industry long term, is looking for personal growth and professional growth. These are good things. So don't be afraid of presenting as someone who is on a trajectory and wants to know where you can take them on that trajectory. I think you should absolutely be asking that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dan. That was really, really insightful. So thank you for that.
Thank you
very much. So now we're going to move across to Mediatonic. So a big thank you to Luke and to Kat from Mediatonic for joining us today. How are you both doing?
Unmute myself. I'm doing well, thanks.
Good.
Right, guys, all good here. Not so much sunny as it is there, but yeah, all good.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. I know you're both incredibly busy, so I appreciate your time. I guess maybe could we just start with one of you telling us a little bit about who Mediatonic are?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Rebecca. I'm Luke. I'm from Mediatonic, or Tonic Games Group, currently most known as being the home of Fall Guys, born out of our largest studio, Mediatonic. I'm Business Operations Director, and at the moment my focus is on how Tonic Games Group can support more people starting careers in studios. And Kat, also with us today, is our Head of Talent, oversees our amazing recruitment team that work to fill the many open roles that we have. So between the two of us, hopefully you'll get a good sense of what it's like at Tonic Games Group. And I'll try and clarify a bit of the difference between Mediatonic and Tonic Games Group. So it's a little bit like Dan was saying about the security of being in a group like Sumo. Tonic Games Group is a development and publishing group, just over 300 people working to create games for everyone. So we try to go quite broad. We have 27 games in active development across a range of genres and platforms, PC, console, and mobile. Some of them, including Fall Guys and Murder by Numbers, are our own IP. But over the years, we've worked on a lot of external IP, including Harry Potter, Yahtzee, Gears of War. In terms of where we are, in the UK, we have offices in London, Brighton, Leamington, and Guildford. Outside the UK, we have an office in Madrid, and some people who are based out of Stockholm and Tokyo. Our Brighton office is just off St James's Street, and one of my lockdown sadnesses is that I really miss getting coffee from Twin Pines, which is probably my favourite ever coffee shop. So I guess that's a recommendation for December at the earliest now, but if you're on St James's Street, go check it out. We've grown a lot over the last couple of years, from around 120 people when I joined in January 2018 to over 300 now. And Kat will probably say a bit more about open roles, but we tend to have quite a few. To give a bit more info on the different companies that make up the group, the largest is Mediatonic. As discussed, that's the home of Fall Guys. There's more than 200 people there across the UK and Madrid working on a range of games. I suppose one of the things we're known for is a taste for the weird and wonderful, which you can see in games like Hatterful Boyfriend, Murder by Numbers, and even Fall Guys. We also got the Irregular Corporation, which is our publishing team. And the focus there is on PC and mobile games within the sim, tycoon, management, strategy games. Our most famous games there are probably PC Building Simulator, which is building a PC on your PC, so super meta, and Good Company, which lets you be the CEO of a robot manufacturing empire. And we've got a bunch of other games coming soon, including Mars Horizon, which I'm really excited about, where you get to run a space agency. And so the two companies kind of work together on something like Murder by Numbers. It was conceived of and designed and created at Mediatonic and then published at the Irregular Corporation. And then we also have Fortitude Games, which is a studio based in Guildford, and they've got a really wonderful style that you'll see a bit more of in the future. In terms of our values, we're really keen to have a positive impact, empower others, and stand the test of time. I think ultimately we want to make the world a better place and to help as many people as possible grow inside and outside the company and do the whole thing as sustainably as possible. And so we're always kind of looking to make games in a responsible and sustainable way. And yeah, that's probably a good intro to Tonic Games Group, I hope.
Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you. I guess you touched upon Fall Guys there, and obviously that was like a smash hit of the summer. Could you tell us a little bit about how creating a title like that, which just exploded, sort of, not literally, obviously, but must have had a huge impact on your team and your culture, and did you see growth, and what was that like?
Yeah, so I can take that one. So whilst Fall Guys has been massive for us and obviously has been a big change, that's all come post-lockdown. Fall Guys for us started almost 2 years ago with an internal idea, a team of 5 people concepting some really cool, quirky things, which grew really organically. I've been with Mediatonic or the Tonic Games Group now for, 18, 19 months. When I come in, that team was still very, very small. At its peak, for a game of the size that we've made, we still only went up to 46 developers on that particular project. So culturally in that particular team, there weren't any big changes because we grew organically over that time. The success of it hasn't been dependent on the size of the team. We've not had to bulk on immediately because a lot of the content was already there. With any of our teams, they're all individual to projects, but we were already growing and a fairly large developer, people working on different projects. And so that side, I think we've got a good established culture and a good set of values that when we're hiring people, we just make sure that whilst not a cookie cutter people, that they do kind of fit in with the way that we want our business to be and to continue to develop on a sustainable way, like we say. Overall, it's kind of attitude and aptitude for us. The more senior the roles, the hard skills do come a lot more obviously prominent in the shopping list of people that we want to hire. But looking at attitude, competencies and how they fit in don't hire kind of people that are just doing it for a quick buck, or they want, the shiny magpies that everyone wants to work on Fall Guys because it's the big thing in the market. It's kind of, why do you want to do the job that you do? What do you love about it? And I think that's what makes Mediatonic quite unique in the way that we are, and our reputation for kind of, being the people first company. Whilst people don't like the wording of it, it ultimately is, we empower people to do the jobs they love, to make products that people love.
Thank you. And when you're talking about the sorts of that recruitment, what sorts of roles do you hire for? Could you sort of give us a bit of an overview of what the team makeup there is like, and sort of, what you hire for?
Yeah, so not dissimilar to what I think Dan's already mentioned. So historically, a lot of our roles are a lot more development focused, because Mediatonic is the bulk of the Tonic Games Group. So we will hire across, and we continue to hire across production roles, QA roles, design roles, tech roles, both, game coding and the server side, and then design as well. And within those, there's the individual roles that fall under each different discipline. As we're growing, and I think Fall Guys is sort of forced the hand a little bit with our own original IP, we've had to then start looking at away from just development roles, and bulking out our operational side, our marketing side, our business side of, who we are and how we continue to develop and grow and support the roles. So, from operations, there's kind of finance, there's HR, there's talent, there's, the other side of production, which is the project management of the business side, environment, studio, office management. So I'm not a game developer. I've never been creative or an artist, but I love games and I love the industry to which I work. So I've carved myself a niche many years ago, before internal recruitment was even a thing in video games. Marketing side, it's not just being a marketer. You can be a community manager and work within that remit. On the PR side, on the licensing side, which supports the business, the legal side, the products, general management, player experience. There's so much more than development of a role if kind of you've got those supportive areas. And for our team, we've been doing a hell of a lot of that since Fall Guys launched. So I think if culture changes within the business, not so much. We're still a growing developer, which we were 6 months ago. Culture changes from what we need and how we need it. Yeah, we're definitely having to support from more of a business point of view now that we've got Fall Guys.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Luke a specific question in a moment about transferable skills, but I just wanted sort of on that recruitment side. When we've done a number of these talks previously, I've been speaking with developers about, what they can do to set themselves apart. And there's a lot of talk about building things yourself on Unity or expanding your portfolio. But when you were talking then about those sort of business, project management, marketing type roles, what do you look for? What could somebody do themselves to try and build, I suppose, a portfolio, but of that sort of more project management, operational type work?
So with those, it's a lot harder to be able to show, right? So again, alluding to what Dan said earlier, because he just literally spilled out what I was going to say on the shopping list of what we look for in people. You can easily show who you are as an artist. You can show source code to show how you code as a developer, whether it be in C# or C++. It's the other roles that take a little bit more thought behind it. So it's researching a business, understanding their product, understanding the industry, showing that, going to events. Obviously, we can't all at the moment, but being able to go to events, listen to talks. It sounds really cliche, but knowledge is power, and being able to go into an application with that understanding and knowledge. And I think, again, going back to the aptitude thing, it shows that willingness to learn. I've got a team of 5 recruiters at Tonic Games Group, and I would never allow them to do this, but there was a study done about 5 years ago now to show the average internal or average recruiter, be it agency or internal, would spend an average of just a mere 7 seconds reviewing a CV. So your CV, your cover letter, whatever it may be, has to reach out and call, I want to know more. And, I would never permit my team to do that because I just think that's shockingly bad practice. But as an overall, you need to make sure that your opening style on your CV shows who you are, shows that you're an interesting person from a point of what you know about the business. You know, we want to know who you are. We want to know what you're passionate about. We want to know what are your core skills. They don't have to be that you're the best C++ programmer in the world, but they have to show who you are as a person and why you want to do what you want to do.
Thank you. And just on that note of events, because I know that that is one of the key ways that we always used to try and encourage people to make contacts. We have been pulling together a list which is on our events calendar of all of the games events that are taking place at the moment online. So if you do want to still be a part of the community, I think it's so important at the moment. So on the Wide Sussex website, we have got an events calendar, and we're trying to populate as much as possible any events that we know that are taking place that people might want to be a part of. I know this week it's Develop Conference, which is normally held in Brighton. All of that's available online at the moment. So, you know, I think there are still ways that you can engage with industry. It's just, it is more challenging, and it is more screen time. So, so thank you for that. Luke, just coming to you, I think when we were talking about transferable skills, I know back at Talent Fest, which is our sort of annual talent festival, which we run over the summer, you gave a fantastic talk about being entrepreneurial in your career and sort of, you know, how you can make your own chances, I suppose. And I wondered if you have any advice for people who perhaps are working in other sectors that want to have a change or see this as an opportunity to do something different. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, well, firstly, thanks. It was a really fun thing to do. Wide Sussex do an incredible job, and I think Talent Fest in particular has like quite a wide impact. I guess part of what I was trying to address is how contextual all advice is. So there's a huge amount of variation across the industry in terms of how people got into games, and what works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for another. So I think some of the kind of basic stock answer is to build a portfolio of some kind of whatever it is that you are good at. Build a portfolio of you doing that thing. If you want to be a game dev, you've got to put the hours in. The good news is there's a lot of different ways to do that. So you can do formal training, or you can do game jams, or you can do tinkering in the spare time. And if your role is like less directly on game dev, then the options are actually even wider in terms of how you can demonstrate aptitude and having put the work in. I guess the closest thing I can think of to actual universal advice is to try and keep up momentum and find some people who will encourage you. The game sector is growing at a tremendous rate, so it's never been better to try and get a job in the game sector, but it's still very difficult to get work. Partly it's just the numbers. There's around 2,000 companies in the UK and about 18,000 jobs, and that number's going up all the time, but very few of those roles are entry level. And in the UK, we have something like 250 game-specific courses producing over 5,000 graduates a year. So the competition is incredibly fierce for those entry-level roles. So it's very competitive, and without a bit of luck, it can be quite a long and frustrating road. So I guess that's why I think momentum and positivity are key. Like if you can keep building stuff, you'll build transferable skills and experience in making things that are useful in any job, in applying for any kind of role. And if you surround yourself with people who will encourage you to keep going and not just point out your mistakes, I think you really increase your chances, because you know, over time you develop taste for yourself, and you can kind of understand about your work, what is good and bad yourself. You don't necessarily need people to point out where you've got wrong. Most of us, we need people to remind us to keep going. So yeah, that would be my advice, is keep up your momentum and find some encouraging people.
Thank you. That's so helpful. Sorry, I have to keep unmuting myself because there's some building work going opposite. So I am absolutely listening, but yeah. I'm concentrating very hard so I don't hang up by mistake. I was just unmuting myself. Thank you. That's really helpful. And I know when we were speaking with Dan about sort of diversity within the sector, and Sumo have got Sumo Academy, and Electric Square have announced Developing Minds. I wondered, you know, is there anything going on at Mediatonic to sort of help that talent pipeline and to sort of help those people who are coming out of education or other sort of routes into industry? What are you doing at Mediatonic around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, like you say, it's quite a broad issue. And I think the UK games industry certainly was engaging with it even before things like Black Lives Matter. So we had the results at the start of the year of our games industry census, which UK organised with the University of Sheffield, that showed us that 70% of game workers in the UK are male, and only 10% of games workers are non-white. So as part of that, all the companies that took part, we also got our own demographics about our own studios. And so that was really helpful. And a few of us kind of signed this Raise the Game pledge to try and improve diversity and inclusion in the industry by creating a diverse workforce, having more welcoming places to work, and reflecting greater diversity in the games from design and development through to marketing as well. And BAFTA actually changed their, they added diversity standards for the games in assessing the games awards, from representation in the game itself and in the team that made it, whether you're providing industry access and opportunities, and helping to actually create a wider player base as well, because the demographics around who plays these games are quite not easy to get, because the platform holders are not always keen to share that stuff, but they skew overwhelmingly male as well. And so, there's a sense across the industry that we need to do better. There have been amazing initiatives from advocacy groups from the last few years, and even other studios. So, like you mentioned, Creative Assembly's legacy project, Sumo Academy, Electric Square, and the Chinese Room. I was just chatting to Dan before we started this call, because they introduced an internship scheme specifically to provide new opportunities for underrepresented groups. And so they're kind of engaging with that. And that's something definitely we're keen to do. We've been partnering with a charity called Into Games. So over the summer, they ran SideQuest, which was a project to get people making games. They had briefs from different companies across the industry, and you could kind of get a little bit of support and encouragement making a game. And the Video Game Ambassadors program, which is Into Games and Yuki, which basically pairs up education and industry. So different people in different studios that are interested in going and doing careers talks can then get paired with opportunities. As I said earlier, at Tonic Games Group, we have this kind of
Sorry, I think we lost you just for a second there. You said, at Mediatonic, we have this, and then you froze, like you left us on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, my screen all flicked black, and I was like, oh gosh, I've really gone and done it now. Well, no, I was just saying earlier that we believe that games are for everyone. And so we need to kind of show that in terms of the opportunities we create. So next year, we're looking to take on a much larger number of graduate level internships than we've ever done before. We're hoping to put out some free video tutorials to introduce people who maybe have a bit of experience making games into what it's like to do that as part of a wider team. And like I say, partnering with people like Into Games and Video Game Ambassadors to address the areas that we're not best placed to address directly as a game studio. But yeah, so lots planned.
And I think just when you mentioned Into Games, then I know when Kat was talking about the wide variety of roles that there are in the games industry, I know on the Into Games website, they've got a fantastic breakdown of all the different types of roles that there are available in the games industry, what you need to get into those roles, and interviews with people who've done that. So I think that's a really great resource. I know that we've got a few graduates on the call that are sort of asking for some more sort of details of the types of roles that are available. So I think that's a great
yeah, check out Into Games. Great resource
for that. Thank you both very much. That was really, really helpful. I'm just checking my notes. I've got a few questions that I'm going to sort of from the audience that I'd like to sort of pull back at Dan to help answer. But I think for now, that was massively helpful. Thank you both very, very much. And so Dan, would you like to join us back on the call? And I've been trying to take notes from the questions that have been coming in from everyone who's watching. I've tried to group them together as best I can. I saw one that was only just posted, which probably leads on from the conversation that we were just having with Luke, specifically asking how people can get feedback on their applications. I think a lot of people are saying that they're applying for work and they get rejections, but I know that that you probably get huge numbers of applicants, and it must be incredibly difficult to get any form of feedback. But is there anything that people could do, either formally through you or through other ways, that they can start to get feedback on their work?
I'm happy to jump in if that's okay on that one, because I deal with applications day in, day out. Whilst any recruitment team or individual recruiter would love to get back personally to every single person, I can use the case study. Recently, we advertised for a community manager role to work on Fall Guys. Our very successful community manager thought he was being kind by tweeting that we were hiring for that role, which was great. But in turn, that meant we had something like 1,400 applications for one role and a team of 5 recruiters hiring for 79 live roles. So whilst we would love to, it's impossible to give individual feedback to everybody with that size of team. If there is specific information or feedback you want, have a look on LinkedIn, have a look on the website, find out who the recruiters are. I'm super open to people reaching out to me individually or the recruitment team, and just being open and nice about, I understand you've probably got a lot of applications. I would really love feedback on this individual point or why I wasn't great this time. And I will always find the time, even if it's a 5-minute call or a return to an email, to do so, because I want to help people and encourage people to be more successful in their next application, be it with us or someone else. What individual recruiters and teams and companies don't like is people that will then go and bash about it online, on LinkedIn. They've not got back to me. They've not got back to me. But in most studios' case that I'm aware of, will always say, whilst we would love to reach out to everyone individually, it's impossible to do so. If there's specific questions, please reach out to the team. And most recruiters will always come back with some form of feedback. It might take a little while, because then we can't always give that initial feedback. We have to rely on hiring managers and a discipline specialist. I can't tell a programmer why they're not great or why they've not been suitable, but they can. So things like that do take a little bit of persistency, but also just a little bit of understanding as well.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Dan?
No, I think that pretty much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so what I say so often when I'm giving careers talks is that you have to remember that it's a person that will be reading your application, and if you can do that bit of research, as you say, to find out who that person might be, or another member of the team that you could reach out to. I think it's that extra level of work is what so many people don't do, and really can be the thing that sets you apart. So thank you for sharing that. Also, I know we were talking about Talent Fest earlier, and actually as part of Talent Fest, we do have a portfolio clinic where we invite studios to have one-to-one sessions with people to get advice on their portfolios. I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that at Talent Fest 2021, but that's a really great way to get one-to-one feedback with a studio. I know we get a lot of great feedback on that. So if you're not already, sign up for our event alerts, keep an eye on our website. We'll make sure that you have information about that when it launches. So thank you. That was really helpful. We've had a lot of questions through YouTube and Facebook, specifically around people with trying to amalgamate all of them together. People with an audio background who want to move into games. And I know this has been, in each of the events that we've done this, there's a huge amount of interest from people who've got skills as sound recordists or have worked in sort of audio departments that want to move into games. Do you have any advice for somebody that would like to do that?
Yeah, it's really, really hard, because there aren't loads of audio roles. There are some, they do come up. We've hired recently. I would say, a bit like Dan was saying earlier, about even the creative roles in studios involve some tech by necessity. So we'd expect you to understand things like Wise and Fmod and have some experience with like working with engineers. So the best way to get that is normally game jams, finding people who kind of want to make games. And it is really hard because you're limited by the amount of time that you have and that kind of stuff. But you probably need to try and build some experience making audio for games specifically, and using the tech that's involved. Yeah, that's probably.
Great. Anything there, Dan, that you'd like? I saw lots of nodding.
Yeah, no, you need to know Wise, and you probably need to have used Wise in combination with another engine like Unreal and Unity and be able to demonstrate that, because audio, without question, will be the smallest department in any game studio you apply for. So it's so competitive.
And also, I think on that one, just popping in there, that to remember that there's always two sides to the audio. So recently we've hired audio designers and audio programmers. So a lot of people can kind of, if they're more technically minded, more than actually sitting there designing the audio, then they can go into one area. Or if they're more creatively minded but still need the technical knowledge, can go into the design side as well. So it's just not one type of role.
I suppose the other thing thinking about as well with stuff like audio, a lot of game studios outsource this sort of stuff, so they work with additional providers. So if you want to work in the games industry, that doesn't mean to say that the only way of getting into the games industry is working for game developers. I think, as Kat said earlier, there are an awful lot of businesses who work in a supporting operation, who work with game developers on solutions for development, but aren't specifically developers themselves. And I think particularly for stuff like audio, you know, we work with a company called Side UK for like all of our dialogue stuff. They've got a team of audio engineers, and you know, they're not alone in being this sort of like crowd of other businesses that are providing solutions to the industry. So I think particularly with audio, and if you're coming from say like a recording, music kind of engineering background, be looking at those outlying industries rather than just developers, because there's an awful lot of opportunities there as well, especially because there's usually a fairly limited number of actual audio developers within a studio, and often a lot of that sort of stuff in terms of music and things like that is going to be outsourced. Not many studios are big enough to be able to have their own music facilities or voiceover facilities. They'll go out to specialist companies for that. So that's probably a better place to start looking necessarily than just going into developers.
And where would someone find out where those outsourcing companies are? Like, I mean, I'm guessing you could just Google it, but is there like a, you know, is there a specific term for them? I'm just thinking, you know, if it
Tiger, Yuki, Develop, the places where that anywhere that developers come together, if that's an online conference or a sort of like a kind of an actual conference, or any of those organizations, they're sort of like doing the research around that. They'll all be there. There are expos and everything like that. If you go down stuff like, you know, they just announced the Tiger Awards. If you go and look at those, and they've got lists of who are seen as the best outsource and kind of like development support companies in the UK. So it's a bit of research, just following the paper trail, really.
That's really helpful. Thank you. There's one specific question that was around how you recruit, given the, I hope I sort of phrase this correctly, but how do you recruit given the new generation of consoles that are coming out and new skills that they may require? So is there a way that, I guess, you know, here at Wide Sussex, we have the Fusebox, which is full of sort of emerging technology and immersive technologies, and it's all cutting edge, and we're constantly talking to people about how they keep their skills up. So I guess it's, if I can add to this question, I guess it's how do you recruit, but also how do people keep their skills up as well to know what you'd be sort of required as the technology changes so rapidly?
I don't think any of us are going to expect people to come in for job interviews knowing how to program or do anything for PS5 or the new Xbox. That's the sort of stuff that we'd teach people. What you are going to be using probably is either a homegrown engine, which is developed by the studio, in which case they'll train you in that, but they'll expect you to know how to use. Most game engines are broadly similar. Unity and Unreal are broadly similar. So if you're going to be working on those new technologies, you're still going to be using probably an engine like Unreal or Unity. If you can demonstrate skills and proficiency in that in your particular specialism area, the studio is going to see that, and they'll train you up into the specifics and keep you live. And any decent studio will have a continuing professional development scheme where they'll be making sure you do stay up to date. And if they don't, it's one of those things that I would see as a little bit of a red flag if I was going for a job, of a studio who couldn't tell me how they were going to ensure that I continue to remain employable while working for them. I would be wary of maybe that job, because what you don't want to be is be put on a project for 2 years and then finish that project and come out at the end of it and realize the industry's moved on and you haven't, because then you're in trouble.
And I think you say they're quite good questions that you can put in that you can pose to the company during an interview that makes that, you know, that shows how strategic you are as well, and that you're thinking about a career, not just a job. And I think sometimes we can be a bit afraid to ask those questions of potential employers because we worry that it could be seen as challenging. But actually, I hope that, you know, as you say, with good studios, they would see that as a real bonus point for somebody. Lots of nodding, I like it. I wanted to just sort of cover one thing, and I don't know if it's a question or more of a statement, but we've spoken quite a lot about transferable skills, and I know that there's lots of people that are thinking about moving into the games industry, and I just wonder if someone's moving in with transferable skills, is it normal that they would drop down a level, or would they normally come in at the same level? And just so when people are sort of considering this as an option, they can sort of think about it from all sides, I suppose.
I mean, I was in operations in a design studio in Brighton before I moved into games, and I did drop a level, but to be honest, that was more about moving from a small company to a much larger company. So I was in a company where there's 30 people, so I was in the senior leadership team of that. Moving into a company of 120 people, it was a natural drop. I think I'll leave this to like Kat and Dan as the experts, but I would imagine where it's on a specific development role, like if you kind of lack experience there, the drop might be a bit greater. But in the transferable skills, I think it probably depends. You know, there are people coming into the kind of central group roles that they've built experience in other industries, and that doesn't count against them. But it probably is more of an issue for the development roles.
Yeah, from my point of view, there's going to be, whether it's a drop or, you know, a fixings per se of the salary for the value and contribution you bring that business. So if you're a programmer for a software company, but don't have games industry experience and want to become a game developer, if your skills are at basic level and your contribution to that business are at basic level, you've got to understand you're going to take a drop and be coming in at that, you know, basic to intermediate level. However, your trajectory up would be significantly advanced to, say, a junior person that doesn't have that back history. So my advice for anyone is have it a clear objection and, you know, process in place for you to hit a certain target within a certain amount of time for you to then get that pay rise. I've done it with many people over my career that you speak to them. It's a really hard conversation to have. I know you're on this much money. You know, we value this position in this business at X amount. However, we would expect you to be back to that or above that within 12 months if you follow this path. And it's just having a clear understanding and managing their expectations from day one, rather than bring someone on and say, oh, here's a 20K pay drop, but yeah, you'll be up there in a year, but they don't know what they need to hit within a year, because then that just leads to failure.
That sounds great. Anything to add, Dan?
No, I think that's pretty much it. And I think it's exactly what Kat said. Actually, any good employer will be able to map out your trajectory for you and give you very clear targets for what you need to do to go forwards.
Thank you. I think we're pretty much done on time. Is there anything that I haven't covered that any of you had wanted to say? No. Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for your time. We've actually set up a Slack group, which everyone will be sent a link to. So if you want to continue these conversations after this event, the link's in the chat, and also it will be sent out to you. It's a great place to go to for continued support and connection and community. So please do join us there. A massive thanks to all of the speakers. A big thank you to my team for helping me on the tech side, and a big thank you to Edward Street again for sponsoring these events. So thank you very much. It's been lovely to see you all. I hope I've covered as many of the questions as I can. And if there is anything else, then feel free to drop me an email or get in touch with the Wide Sussex team, and we'll see what we can do to help. Have good days, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.